All right, so today we're going to talk about something that affects every single one of us, stress. But what if there was a totally new way to look at it, a way to actually measure it? That's what this is all about. We're going to break down something called the Rouse Relational Operating System. It's designed to measure the hidden structure of our relationships and, yeah, give us a score for our stress. Let's dive in.
Okay, so let's just start with this question, because it really gets to the core of everything. Think about it. We have a credit score for our money. We have blood pressure readings for our health. We can measure pretty much everything, right? So why isn't there a credit score for stress? For something so huge in our lives, why are we just stuck with saying, I feel stressed? Why can't we get a real number for the load we're actually carrying?
And this slide, this really shows you the big shift in thinking. On one side, you've got our current tools, which are basically just feelings. It's all about self-reporting, describing things qualitatively. It just tells you how you feel. But on the other side, with the Rouse OS approach, it's completely different. It's about measurement. It's not interested in how you feel. It wants to calculate the actual load you're under. It's diagnostic, it's quantitative, a total game changer.
All right, Section 1, Engineering Human Relationships. So yeah, this brings us to the really wild idea at the heart of all this. What happens when you treat human relationships like an engineering problem?
So here it is, the big what if. What if we stopped treating stress like this, this vague emotional cloud we have to manage, and instead treated it like a structural load that we can actually calculate? I mean, think about that. It completely reframes the problem. Suddenly, your life, your team at work, your family, they're not just groups of people. They're structures. And every structure is bearing a load. And if that's true, then the most important question isn't, hey, how are you feeling? It's, how much weight can this thing actually hold before it breaks?
And this image, the honeycomb, it's just the perfect visual for this idea. It's not just a cool design, right? It's a load-bearing structure. Every single one of those little cells is connected, and they all work together to distribute pressure across the whole thing. If one cell gets weak, it puts stress on all the others. The whole system can get compromised. That's exactly the idea behind this concept of relational systems engineering.
Okay, Section 2, the 5 structural regulators. So if we're going to think of our relationships as a structure, we have to ask, well, what are the building blocks? What are the main parts? That's what these 5 regulators are all about. Let's get into them.
So the system has this really smart way of breaking things down. It looks at 5 key areas, and this is important. It looks at them in a very specific order. First up, you've got the environment. All the outside pressures coming at you. Then, it looks at the self. What's your own individual capacity? What resources do you have inside? After that, it's the mortar. I love that term. It's basically the glue holding things together, the quality of your bonds. Then, reciprocity. Is the load being shared evenly, or is one person carrying all the weight? And finally, there's time, which, as we all know, can make everything better or a whole lot worse. It's the amplifier. By going through it in this exact order, the system can figure out precisely where the cracks are starting to show.
Okay, Section 3, the Rouse Equation, a number for stress. So, you've got all this complex analysis, right? Environment, self, mortar. How do you make that useful? How do you make it simple? Well, you turn it into a number.
And this is the engine that does it, the Rouse Equation. It's pretty straightforward when you break it down. It starts with the total pressure on your system. That's the base pressure. Then it subtracts all the good stuff, your resources, the things that stabilize you. Like having a solid support system, some savings, or just a clear sense of purpose. And what you're left with, that's the real load you're carrying. And the output, it's not a feeling, it's a hard number.
And here's where it gets really practical. That number isn't just floating in space. It gets plotted on this simple scale. Think of it just like a medical chart. A score of, say, 45 isn't just a number. It tells you you're in the high load zone. It's like a doctor telling you your blood pressure is high. There's no guesswork. You immediately know if you're in the green, if things need monitoring, or if you're in the red and need to make some serious changes.
Section 4, data, not just feelings. Okay, this is cool. But what we've talked about so far is just the beginning. The real magic happens when you connect this system to the tech we all have on our wrists right now.
Okay, so think about your smartwatch or your fitness tracker. It gives you all this data, right? Heart rate, sleep score, HRV. But it only tells you what's happening. It never tells you why. Well, this system is like the missing translation key. For instance, your watch might say your resting heart rate has been high for a week. Okay, why?
This system could look at that data and say, that's not just random stress, that's a physiological signal of a massive environment load. But here's the really mind-blowing part. Imagine two people in a relationship, both wearing trackers. And the data shows that one person's recovery scores always tank after they've spent time together. With this system, that's not just a weird coincidence anymore. That is hard data pointing to a reciprocity imbalance. The wearable data is literally showing you the structural problem in the relationship. That's incredible.
And, this isn't some niche idea. Look at this number. The ambition here is massive. We're talking about creating a whole new layer of diagnostics for huge industries, digital mental health, wearable tech, even corporate HR. The goal is to create the standard for measuring relational health, which is a space that, well, nobody really owns right now. And it's a market worth a staggering amount of money.
All right, Section 5, the future of connection. So let's zoom out. What's the big takeaway from all this?
I really want to land on this quote because it sums up the whole philosophy perfectly. Crisis does not cause structural failure. It reveals pre-existing structural conditions. Think about that. That big blow-up argument, that moment of total burnout. This system says that's not the cause of the problem. That's just the moment the earthquake hits and reveals the cracks that were already in the foundation all along.
So, when you boil it all down, that's the paradigm shift. We're moving away from this endless fuzzy loop of trying to describe how we feel and moving toward the clear, objective goal of measuring what our system can actually handle. It's about finding out the real breaking point of our relationships, our jobs, our teams. It's a move from opinion to hard evidence.
And so that leaves us with this final question, and it's a big one. We're totally used to our devices counting our steps and scoring our sleep, but what changes when those same devices can measure the actual strength of our connections, our friendships, our partnerships? What happens when we have a number for that? What do we do with that knowledge? Something to think about.